You may have watched The Passion of the Christ and believed you knew its power. But what happened behind the cameras is a story far darker, stranger, and more unsettling than anything on screen. During filming, lightning struck the set. Actors were injured in disturbing ways. And the man portraying Jesus did not merely act suffering. He lived dangerously close to it. These were not rumors whispered after the premiere. They happened in real time, documented, witnessed, and quietly brushed aside. Was it coincidence? Or did a film centered on the crucifixion stir something heavier than its creators expected? Tonight, we look beyond the script and into the moments no trailer ever showed. Moments that made even seasoned filmmakers uneasy. Moments that raise an uncomfortable question. Was this film merely art, or something else entirely? Before we begin, if you're ready to explore what most people never talk about, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and join us as we uncover what truly happened during the filming of The Passion of the Christ. Before The Passion of the Christ existed, it existed as a pressure. At the time Mel Gibson committed to this project, his life was divided in ways few people around him fully understood. Publicly, he was still a dominant force in Hollywood. Privately, he was living with constant tension. His faith was not symbolic or flexible. It demanded accountability, discipline, and confrontation. Values that did not sit easily inside an industry built on image and distance. That conflict followed him everywhere. Gibson was surrounded by success, yet increasingly disconnected from it. The recognition no longer answered the questions he was carrying. What was the value of influence if it never pointed beyond itself? What was the point of belief if it remained comfortable and untested? Those questions were not theoretical. They pressed on him daily. Friends noticed that he spoke less, listened more, and withdrew for long periods. His attention drifted away from future projects and towards something unresolved. There was a sense that he was preparing, though for what, no one could say. The idea of the film did not arrive as inspiration. It arrived as urgency. Gibson believed that the story of Jesus' final hours had become distant, reduced to tradition and repetition. People recognized the cross, but avoided the cost behind it. The suffering had been softened, almost abstracted, until it no longer demanded anything from those who heard it. He wanted to strip that distance away, not to shock and not to persuade, but to force attention. To place the audience where comfort was impossible. To tell the story without relief, without explanation, without escape. That intention made the project radioactive from the beginning. Studios hesitated. Advisors warned him that such a film would alienate audiences and damage reputations. Gibson understood the risk immediately. What he did not do was retreat. He chose instead to remove every layer of protection, funding the film himself and refusing outside control. Those early decisions shaped the atmosphere that followed. This was not a set driven by excitement or anticipation. It was driven by restraint. Conversations were quieter. Humor was rare. There was a shared sense that the work demanded seriousness, not enthusiasm. Some collaborators left before filming began, offering polite reasons that failed to explain the unease underneath. When Jim Caviezel was cast, Gibson did not present the role as an opportunity. He framed it as a burden. He warned him that the role could change how he was seen, how he worked, how his career unfolded. Accepting it meant surrendering control. Caviezel accepted. By the time production began, The Passion of the Christ was no longer simply a film in development. It had become the result of a man confronting belief, guilt, and responsibility without compromise. From the first day on set, it was clear that Jim Caviezel was not approaching this role the way actors usually do. He did not treat the character as something to step into and out of between takes. There was no visible switch, no moment where the weight lifted. As the days passed, crew members noticed that he spoke less, conserved his energy, and carried himself with a quiet seriousness that never fully relaxed. It was as if the role had settled on him rather than been worn. The physical demands arrived quickly, but what unsettled people was not the difficulty. It was the accumulation. Scene after scene required endurance rather than performance. Long hours under harsh conditions, heavy materials pressing into injured muscles, exposure to cold that seeped past costumes and into the bones. Medical staff were present, but often unnecessary. Caviezel rarely complained. When asked if he needed a break, he usually shook his head. What few realized at the time was how little margin there was between continuing and collapse. His body absorbed impact after impact, sometimes literally. Not because of recklessness, but because realism left little room for protection. Accidents occurred where timing failed by seconds. Equipment slipped, movements misaligned. Each incident alone might have been manageable. Together, they formed a pattern that concerned even seasoned professionals. There were moments when filming stopped, not because a scene was finished, but because Caviezel could no longer stand without assistance. Between takes, he was often silent, eyes closed, breathing controlled, as if concentrating on remaining present rather than reacting to pain. What disturbed some crew members most was his refusal to dramatize what was happening to him. No anger, no visible fear, just acceptance. Then came the incident that shifted the atmosphere entirely. During the filming of an exterior sequence, weather conditions changed without warning. What had been manageable suddenly turned violent. In the confusion, a lightning strike hit close enough to be felt by everyone nearby. Caviezel was affected directly. For several seconds, no one moved. The set fell silent in a way that had nothing to do with discipline. He survived, but after that day, the way people looked at him changed. Not with admiration, with unease. Medical checks followed. Filming resumed. Caviezel returned to the set quieter than before. Some noticed his hands shaking slightly between scenes. Others noticed his focus sharpening, as if distraction was no longer an option. Privately, he began to experience moments of disorientation, sudden fatigue, physical weakness that came without warning. Doctors advised caution. He continued. What drove him forward was not ambition. He later explained that walking away felt impossible, not because of contracts or pressure, but because leaving the role unfinished felt like abandoning something entrusted to him. By the end of production, Caviezel's body had paid a visible price. Weight loss, lingering injuries, long recovery periods that followed him long after filming wrapped. Yet when asked later if he regretted it, he never framed the experience as loss. He framed it as consequence. And that distinction matters. Because the question raised by his experience was never whether the role was dangerous. It was whether some stories, once embodied fully, demand more than performance. And whether anyone can carry that weight without being changed by it. As filming continued, attention slowly shifted away from individual hardship and toward the environment itself. Something about the set felt unstable, not chaotic, but unpredictable. Experienced crew members, people who had worked through extreme conditions before, began to notice that the usual rules no longer seemed reliable. Plans were made carefully, checked repeatedly, then unraveled without clear cause. Weather became the first warning. Forecasts were studied, schedules adjusted. And yet, conditions changed abruptly, often mid-scene. Calm skies turned heavy without buildup. Wind arrived suddenly, strong enough to tear through equipment and scatter props that had been secured minutes earlier. These shifts did not follow patterns. They interrupted moments of focus, then vanished as quickly as they appeared. Technical issues followed. Lighting systems failed after passing inspections. Cameras powered down without explanation. Sound equipment cut out during emotionally precise moments, forcing retakes that left actors drained. Engineers searched for faults and found none. Power sources were stable, wiring intact. Still, the problems returned. At first, these disruptions were treated as coincidence. Large productions always face complications. But repetition has a way of changing interpretation. When the same type of failure occurs again and again, especially during specific scenes, people begin to pay closer attention. Quiet conversations started to circulate among the crew. Not dramatic claims, just observations shared cautiously. Someone mentioned the strange timing. Another spoke about a sense of pressure during certain sequences, as if the air itself felt heavier. These comments were never made loudly. They were exchanged in passing, between tasks, quickly dropped when others approached. Then, there were the moments that could not be logged in reports. A sudden stillness before interruptions, a feeling that something was about to go wrong seconds before it did. Crew members described stopping mid-action without knowing why, only to watch equipment fail or weather shift moments later. No alarms, no warnings, just instinct. One incident stood out. During preparation for a major scene, multiple devices failed at once, not sequentially, simultaneously. Filming stopped. The delay stretched longer than expected. Frustration built. Then, almost as suddenly as it had begun, everything returned to normal. Systems restarted. Power stabilized. The scene resumed without explanation. No solution was ever documented. Instead of fear, a different response emerged. Focus deepened. Distractions faded. Jokes disappeared entirely. The set grew quieter, more deliberate. People moved carefully, spoke less, watched more. It was as if everyone sensed that precision mattered more than usual, that mistakes carried weight beyond inconvenience. What made this shift unsettling was not belief in something supernatural. It was the absence of language. No one knew how to describe what they were experiencing without sounding irrational. So most chose silence. Yet silence did not equal dismissal. The environment had become an active presence, not hostile, not welcoming, simply there, interrupting when it chose to, refusing to be ignored. By this stage, the question was no longer whether the production was difficult. It was whether the story being told had begun to press back against the process of telling it. And once that thought took hold, it changed how every interruption was perceived. Not as delay, but as response. The most unsettling moments did not happen under lights or in front of cameras. They happened afterward. As filming progressed, several cast and crew members began to experience disturbances that did not stay on set. These were not shared publicly at the time. They surfaced later in fragments, interviews, and quiet conversations. What connected them was not drama, but hesitation. People spoke as if unsure whether they should say anything at all. Sleep was the first thing to change. Some reported recurring dreams that felt unusually vivid, marked by repetition rather than narrative. The same images returned night after night, not copied from the script, but adjacent to it. Moments of waiting, watching, standing at a distance while events unfolded without intervention. The dreams did not terrify, but they lingered, leaving exhaustion behind. Others described waking suddenly with a sense of presence. Not fear exactly, awareness, as if something had interrupted rest without touching anything physical. These experiences were brief, difficult to describe, and often dismissed by those who experienced them, at least at first. But repetition has a way of eroding dismissal. A few actors admitted that their emotional responses began to shift without clear reason. Scenes that were not meant to be overwhelming triggered unexpected reactions. Tears arrived early. Silence stretched longer than planned. Some found it difficult to speak immediately after filming, as if words needed time to return. One performer later recalled doubting whether certain memories belonged to the production or to something else entirely. The line between reenactment and reflection blurred. What was practiced during the day resurfaced at night in altered form, stripped of dialogue, reduced to feeling. There were also reports of shared experiences. Two individuals, working separately, described seeing the same figure during a large crowd sequence. Not a detailed vision, more a silhouette. Light-toned clothing, movement without urgency. Neither recognized the person. Neither could later find anyone matching the description among cast or crew. When the accounts were compared, the similarities were unsettling. No explanation followed. No investigation produced results. The incident faded into the background, mentioned less frequently as production continued. Yet its effect remained. People began to carry their experiences quietly. Not because they were instructed to, but because speaking about them felt inappropriate, as if giving them shape might distort something that was not meant to be handled directly. Despite this, no one left. Instead, a strange bond formed. Not friendship in the usual sense, but recognition. A shared understanding that something about the process was affecting them beyond professional engagement. Faith shifted for some. Doubt deepened for others. A few found themselves questioning beliefs they had not examined in years. What unified these reactions was not belief in a single explanation. It was the sense that the story they were telling had refused to remain contained. It followed them into rest, into thought, into silence. And by the time filming reached its most demanding sequences, many involved understood that whatever was happening was no longer limited to performance. The film had become an experience, one that did not end when the director called cut. By the midpoint of production, it became clear that the pressure was no longer resting solely on the actors. It was converging on the director. Mel Gibson was present for nearly everything, not hovering, not dramatic, but constant. He watched scenes repeatedly, often in silence, rarely interrupting unless something felt wrong. When he did speak, it was precise, controlled. There was no room for improvisation that softened the weight of what was being portrayed. This intensity unsettled some people. In an industry used to compromise, Gibson's refusal to adjust tone or meaning felt inflexible. He rejected suggestions that might make the film more accessible or less confrontational. When arguments arose, they were not about logistics, but boundaries. How far was too far? At what point did realism become excess? Gibson's answer never changed. If the story was true, then restraint would be dishonest. Yet his leadership was not defined by severity alone. Behind the camera, moments of quiet consideration surfaced. When conditions became physically dangerous, he paused production without hesitation. When crew members struggled, he noticed. Warm drinks appeared. Breaks were extended. He checked on people personally, not as a gesture, but as obligation. This duality confused many. He demanded absolute commitment to the material, yet showed unexpected care for those carrying it. Frustration surfaced when standards were not met, but it was often followed by reassurance. Those close to him later said that his intensity came from fear of distortion, not control. He believed that even small alterations could weaken the truth he was trying to convey. At times, the weight of that responsibility became visible. There were days when Gibson withdrew between takes, standing apart, watching the set as if measuring something unseen. Conversations would pause when he approached, not out of fear, but uncertainty. People sensed that the project had become deeply personal, bound to something he was unwilling or unable to articulate fully. Criticism continued to build outside the production. Accusations circulated. Questions multiplied. Gibson was aware of them. He did not respond. His focus narrowed instead, as if finishing the film was the only answer he intended to give. What set him apart during this period was not confidence. It was resolve. He did not act like a man chasing approval or recognition. He acted like someone who had already accepted the cost. Whatever followed, praise or condemnation, seemed secondary to completion. The film needed to be finished as it began, without dilution. This attitude spread quietly through the crew. People worked longer hours without complaint. Precision increased. Distractions vanished. The sense of participating in something ordinary disappeared entirely. Whether they agreed with Gibson or not, they recognized that retreat was no longer an option. By this stage, the question surrounding the production had shifted. It was no longer about whether the film was controversial. It was about whether its creator was willing to carry the consequences of telling the story exactly as he believed it needed to be told. And all signs suggested that he was. When filming finally ended, there was no sense of relief. Production usually concludes with release, celebration, distance. This time, separation felt incomplete. People returned home, resumed routines, stepped back into ordinary life. Yet something followed them quietly. The work was finished. The effect was not. For many involved, the first sign was exhaustion that did not fade. Not physical fatigue, but a deeper weariness. Conversations felt heavier. Silence lasted longer. Several cast members admitted later that it took weeks before they could watch unrelated films or step onto another set without feeling disoriented, as if the rhythm of normal storytelling had been disrupted. Then the film was released. Reaction was immediate and intense. Viewers did not respond passively. Some left theaters shaken. Others sat in silence long after the screen went dark. Reports surfaced of people becoming physically unwell during screenings. Ushers and staff described moments of confusion as audiences reacted in ways they had never witnessed before. Debate followed quickly. Religious leaders disagreed sharply. Critics argued over intention and impact. Supporters defended the film as necessary. Detractors called it excessive. What stood out was not the division itself, but the depth of it. This was not a film people simply liked or disliked. It demanded a response. For those who had made it, that response felt personal. Several actors chose not to participate in extended promotion. Interviews were measured, carefully worded. When asked about their experiences, many paused before answering, as if deciding how much could be said without misrepresenting something they still struggled to understand. The lead actor in particular stepped away from the spotlight. Opportunities came, but acceptance was selective. Fame seemed less relevant after what he had endured. When he did speak, his tone was calm, almost detached. He did not frame the experience as achievement. He spoke of it as something survived. The film itself continued to travel. It reached places where it was restricted edited, or officially unavailable. Still, people found ways to see it. Conversations emerged in regions where religious discussion had long been avoided. Not all responses were positive, but indifference was rare. Financial success arrived quietly, almost ironically. The numbers were extraordinary, yet they felt disconnected from the atmosphere surrounding the project. Money had never been the point. Those involved understood that immediately. What lingered most was transformation. Some people felt their faith deepen. Others questioned beliefs they had carried unquestioned for years. A few admitted that the film unsettled them without offering clarity. It did not resolve anything. It exposed. And perhaps that was its lasting effect. The film left theaters, then headlines, then debates. But it did not leave the people who touched it. It stayed with them, not as memory, as imprint. Which raises a final, uncomfortable thought. If a story can affect its creators this deeply, long after the work is done, then perhaps its impact was never meant to end with the closing credits. When the Passion of the Christ finally settled into history, one truth became clear. The film had ended. The consequences had not. For Mel Gibson, life after the film did not return to balance. Public scrutiny intensified rather than faded. Every interview, every appearance, every future project was viewed through the lens of what he had made. He was no longer simply a filmmaker or actor. He became a symbol. To some, of courage. To others, of controversy. That weight never fully lifted. What changed most visibly was his relationship with silence. After the release, Gibson spoke less about faith, not because it mattered less, but because it had been exposed so completely. The film had taken something internal and placed it before the world. There was nothing left to clarify. He had said what he needed to say with images rather than explanations. For many involved, the transformation was quieter, but no less real. Some crew members described a shift in how they approached work afterward. Smaller projects felt hollow. Routine storytelling lost its urgency. A few left the industry altogether, not out of disillusionment, but because they felt they had already participated in something that demanded more than technical skill. Others carried a sense of restraint into their lives. Less noise, fewer distractions. Conversations became more deliberate. One former technician admitted that after the film, he stopped treating stories as entertainment first. He began asking what they asked of the audience in return. The lead actor's life followed a different trajectory entirely. His career did not collapse, but it changed shape. Opportunities arrived, but the momentum felt altered. He was no longer interchangeable. Directors saw him differently. Audiences projected meaning onto him that he had never sought. He accepted that shift without resentment. In later years, he spoke of the role not as a turning point, but as a dividing line. There was a version of himself before the film, and a version after. Neither was better, they were simply different. The audience, too, was changed. For some viewers, the film reignited faith. For others, it unsettled assumptions they had never questioned. Many admitted they avoided watching it again, not because it lacked quality, but because it demanded too much attention. It was not background cinema. It asked to be endured. Years passed, yet the film refused to age quietly. It resurfaced in discussions about art and belief, suffering and representation. New generations encountered it without the original controversy, yet responded with the same intensity. That consistency suggested something unsettling. The reaction was not tied to its time. It was tied to its content. Perhaps that is the film's most enduring mystery. It did not comfort. It did not resolve. It did not explain. It confronted. Looking back, the question was never whether strange events occurred during filming, or whether coincidences carried meaning. Those details, while unsettling, are secondary. The real question is this: why did so many people walk away changed? Why did a single production leave such a long shadow across careers, beliefs, and personal lives? Some will say it was dedication taken too far. Others will call it coincidence amplified by interpretation. A few will insist something sacred was disturbed. The film itself offers no answer. It stands where it has always stood, silent, unyielding, waiting for the viewer to decide what they saw and what it cost. And perhaps that is why it still unsettles. Because the Passion of the Christ never asked to be liked. It asked to be faced. If this story made you pause, reflect, or question what you thought you knew, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue exploring stories that don't end when the credits roll. Thank you for watching.
Hey everyone, I have to be honest, digging into the production logs for this video was genuinely unsettling. We usually think of movies as controlled environments, but the reports of lighting strikes and physical agony on a set feel disturbingly real. It forced you to ask if they were just making a film or engaging in actual spiritual warfare. The sheer weight Jim Caviezel carried wasn't acting, it was survival. That's the kind of raw, unfiltered truth we aim to bring you here. Stories that don't just entertain, but comfort you. If you are tired of surface-level content and want to explore the mysterious that history tries to brush aside, this is your home. Subscribe to the channel and let's keep uncovering what lies in the dark together.